As we were saying before, we are in Paris. This is the COP21. We're trying to get a global agreement. It is really not the first time. We've been there before. We were there in Copenhagen, and it failed spectacularly. Now, it's more important than ever, as we are running out of time, that we really come to terms with this reality that is climate change. The scale of action that is needed is unprecedented. We're talking about really transforming our societies, transforming into a low-carbon, zero-waste path. So let's say, as Dominic said, it's kind of a pretty urgent problem. And yet, the good news, and what we're trying to be telling everyone here today, is that we have some good news, and the waste sector can definitely provide solutions and can provide ideas and projects, and there's lots of people around the world that is engaged in making this change happen. As Dominic was saying, we're really facing some accounting issues in the inventories. If we were to follow the IPCC and the UNFCCC, we would think that the waste sector is not contributing so much to climate change. You can see it's following that, between 7–8%. That's not so much, actually. But it's very clear now why this is happening. It's because we're only seeing the landfill and the incineration contribution. But for anyone that's been working in the waste sector, well, and we know that this methane and the CO2 only accounting for waste disposal activities, but we know, like those that are familiar with the waste sector, we will know that this is only the tip of the iceberg, and that in fact, what is important is that we need to see all the activities that are involved in this sector, and we need to account for all the greenhouse gas emissions that are embedded in products. There is another report from 2009 that mentioned that in the US, actually, if we're looking at the emissions related to stuff, that is the emissions that are involved in the provision of goods and the provision of food, they put account to about the 42% of all the emissions. This is considering all this life cycle of products, from the extraction and production and distribution and consumption, and finally the disposal. So we need to see all this big framework. What Dominic and Nomia team put forward in this report is that the main problems are that, indeed, we're only looking at the disposal activities, so we are like overlooking all the contribution from waste prevention and recycling. We have a huge problem overlooking the biogenic emissions and considering that they are carbon neutral. And we have also a massive problem if all these emissions are only going to be accounted where they are produced, and we are sort of ignoring where this product, with all these emissions that are embedded in this product, are consumed. The report not only presented on these problems, actually give us a guidance on what are the best options in the waste sector. And this is what we call, what we put under this umbrella, this vision that we call the zero waste path, which basically give us a goal and a strategy and a commitment to continually minimize the production of waste. Residual waste, continually minimize the burning and the burning of waste. And we'll hear today about programs that are reducing waste, producing biogas, composting, redesigning, engaging in sustainable consumption and production. So, moreover, I would say that in the global context, we would say that looking at the waste sector is not only about counting emissions. Waste involves people, and especially in the global south, it involves informal recyclers or recyclers that in the developing countries are about up to 2 million of people that are making their livelihoods out of the recycling sector. The Global Alliance of Waste Pickers has engaged extensively for the last years in the COP negotiations, demanding respect for people and demanding that the climate policies and finance does not overlook their contribution, as we are looking into zero waste solutions that are not only reducing emissions but also creating jobs. and revitalizing local economies and providing livelihoods for people. So let's go to the COP21. What are we expecting to be agreed? A global deal to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. We've been seeing throughout this year, 2015, all these countries that have been invited to put forward their pledges to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. They're called the intended nationally determined contributions. And just to give you an idea of how they look like, for example, the EU has said that they will cut 40% of their emissions compared to 1990 levels by 2030. And we've seen this from many countries all around the world. Now, these pledges, what we know today, is that they are not enough. So if we are to actually implement these pledges, we would be on the path to a global warming of 3 degrees. So nothing that will prevent us from an increase of 2 degrees, nothing that will prevent us from an increase of 1.5, which would be the minimum that we need to prevent catastrophic climate change. So these pledges do not guarantee that we're going to stay below that temperatures. They do not guarantee that this is a fair share, that they are taking into account the historical responsibilities of the countries that have contributed the most to climate change. And what's more important for us, these pledges do not guarantee that the climate policies that will be implemented to make those reductions happen will be actually the best climate policies, and definitely not in the waste sector. The climate finance package is the second big area under discussion. And this involves all these funds from the developed countries to developing countries that are supposed to be helping developing countries to mitigate climate change and also to adapt to climate change. This is a commitment that comes from the Copenhagen Accord, and actually the commitment is for 100 billion a year by 2020. There was also a commitment to create the Green Climate Fund, this international institution that's going to be channeling this money from the north to the south. And there's been a lot of disagreement, whether this fund should be public, should be private, the role of intermediaries, etc. The importance for us is that some of the pledges of the countries are actually conditional to these funds. And so as the money flows, and if we are positive, this money will only be increasing, because definitely we want that the rich countries are committed and are helping globally to stop and adapt to climate change. What we're seeing, though, is that in these flows of money, there is a really critical lack of criteria of where this money should go. So the Green Climate Funds, for example, should it back waste-to-energy incinerators? Should it back really the disposal activities? It's clear that it shouldn't. We definitely don't think so. And yet, we don't see that the Green Climate Fund is actually having any exclusion criteria. To be honest, it's not having any criteria, not even to stop coal. So it's kind of a very minimal requirement here that we say the Green Climate Fund, as the mission state, should actually make sure that the money goes to the best options to reduce emissions. Some of the intermediaries have a track record of also not showing a quite clear criteria on environmental sustainability, and have been putting the money in the wrong pockets. And we are seeing how the NAMAs, which are the nationally appropriate mitigation actions, this is climate policies that the global south countries are putting forward. We are seeing how some of European institutions, especially in Germany, are encouraging the incineration of waste in cement plants, which is a global trend that we are observing with great alarm. Also in the EU, and I'm just echoing what you will find in the report that Dominic and the Eunomia team has put forward, we see how there are important misalignments between what we know would be the right options in the waste sector, and not only for the waste sector, but also for climate, and the reality. Renewable energy subsidies given to incineration, when this doesn't make any sense. Incinerators that not included in the EU ETS, while they are facilities that are producing energy and receiving subsidies for that. And also the effort sharing decision, which is in a specific policy that John was also mentioning before, which would set up some targets in the waste sector to be reducing emissions. And at this point, it's completely unambitious. So we're calling also for increasing emissions on that. So the lesson here, or the point that I want to make, is that even if we have an amazing deal and even if we have a great target and everyone is driving, we still have to answer this question. We still have to answer how are we going to reduce emissions? And I think it's very important that we are clear in the waste sector on what are these options, and that we transform and change the policies accordingly, so that we make sure that the best options have the support that they deserve. Despite all these challenges, actually zero waste is happening, which is kind of a really amazing reality that some of us have the privilege to be a testimony of. And definitely in Zero Waste Europe, we're trying to make that known to everybody. Please check our case studies. Cities around the world that are reducing emissions, transforming recycling systems. And precisely today, this conference today is going to be a chance to hear some of these great testimonies. Wrapping up, just key ideas that I want to leave with you. Climate change, it's bad news, but let's take it as an opportunity. Let's see the opportunity for transformation that is in front of us. And let's see it in the waste sector. Let's be clear on what are the options that we need to support. It is waste reduction, reuse, recycling, and redesign the best ways to reduce these emissions. We are facing main challenges with the financial investments that are completely going in the wrong way. And despite that, we see examples all over the world that can guide this transformation. In Paris, we will be saying, and next week we will be engaging in the negotiations inside, that any climate policy, and not only this Paris deal, any climate policy around the world must recognize and address these loopholes, especially in the waste sector, and that mitigation policies, all these climate policies that hopefully will start happening all over the world, will have to have a really clear criteria on what to do in the waste sector. Especially the targets on the financial institutions will be especially important, as this is the money that will be driving the change. Thank you so much. I hope you have a very good day, and I'll be available for questions afterwards.